Hey guys, in this video today I'm going to show you guys how to make a small 2 foot by 4 foot workbench on wheels, also with the bottom shelf. Let's get to it. Alright guys, so the materials for this workbench are going to be pretty simple. I'm going to need 5 2x4s. We might not use all 5, but 5 is a good number in case we make any mistakes that we'll have extra wood left over here. We're going to need 2 2 foot by 4 foot plywood sheets. This is my small area, so I'm not going to use a full sheet of plywood. I'm not going to fit, so I'm going to use 2 foot by 4 foot sheets at 3/4 of an inch. Now I'm also going to use 4 swiveling casters, all with brakes on it, to ensure that my workbench never moves when I'm pushing stuff when I'm working on it. I'm going to need some 2.5 inch pocket hole screws, as well as 1.5 inch pocket hole screws. And finally, you're going to see here I'm going to be using sheet metal screws to screw the casters to the base of the workbench. Now you're probably going to wonder, why am I using sheet metal screws? So sheet metal screws have a higher thread count. The thread goes all the way up to the head of the screw. But what I found at work and as well as in my shop is that sheet metal screws are more durable. They have that self-tapping feature at the end of the tip that allow the screw to go in easier and allow the screw to hold better actually. So I'm going to be using sheet metal screws for this application. Let's get to it. Now guys, if you guys don't have a proper way of organizing all of your pocket hole screws, I highly recommend you do so. I picked up this Dewalt organizer, large bin organizer, during Black Friday for 10 bucks, but they normally go for 20. But I mean, in my opinion, it's all worth it. All these containers pull out, and you can put your individual labels, which I haven't done yet, but I need to, put individual labels of screw size on them. And you know, it just keeps everything organized. I can have all my outdoor rated screws up here, all my different lengths here, as well as my pocket hole jig can also fit in this giant one right here that I'll be using later in this video. But it's just a perfect and easy, simple way to keep all your pocket hole screws organized without making a giant mess of things. Alright guys, so like I said earlier, our workbench is going to be our outfeed table for our table saw here. And that means that the workbench has to match the table saw height. And so some of you might be wondering, how do I do that with the casters and everything in the way? So what you're first going to do is you're going to measure your width from your caster to your plate here. And that's going to be, for me, that's going to be 3 3/4 of an inch. So you can measure it that way, or you can look up online wherever you buy your casters, Home Depot, Harbor Freight, wherever, and they'll show you your product height. So you can do it that way too. I prefer to do this to get a little bit more of an accurate measurement of how tall the casters are going to be. You're going to take that measurement and you subtract it off of your height of your table saw. For me, it's going to be 34 3/4. So 34 3/4 minus 3 3/4, and then after that you're going to subtract your thickness of your tabletop. So my tabletop is 3/4 of an inch, so you're going to subtract another 3/4 of an inch. And then after that, you'll have your final measurement for how long your legs need to be. So let's get to cutting the legs. So now I got all my pieces cut off the miter saw. I now have 8 total pieces of wood at 30 inches. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be butting them up together in an L shape in order to make my leg. Now, what I need to do first is I'm going to need to cut every other piece. So I'm going to need to cut 4 out of these 8 down, because these need to be at equal lengths. So in order to do that, you just take the width of this board, so for a 2x4, that's 1.5 inches, and you're going to need to cut that off of your other leg, and that'll make it equal. Alright, now using my table saw, I set my fence at 2 inches and I ripped down the 4 legs I needed to cut. Alright, now that I got my legs all cut out and stuff, I gotta attach this small portion on this large portion like that, making that L shape. Now how I'm going to do that is with a pocket hole jig. Now this is one by Massca. I really like these ones. They're very affordable compared to the Craig jigs. Those are really really pricey for what they are. Massca makes a good affordable beginner set, which I bought, which was this twin jig, and it came with instructions that I use a lot to determine what my height and depth of my little piece needs to be, as well as the drill bit. Okay, now that we have our pieces drilled out, let's grab one wide leg, and one of our legs we just drilled our pocket holes in. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put beaded glue. This is type bond 1, perfect for this type of application. Just run it along there. We don't need to smooth it out or anything, that's just a good bead, just to hold in place, give a little bit of support. And what we're going to do is we're going to flush our piece with the back as well on the two ends. And then what we'll do next is we'll clamp either side so that we have no issues when we're drilling. Alright, now I got our boards clamped here. I just used some of these Harbor Freight clamps. They're perfect for this application. We're going to take our screws that we bought. These are going to be 1.5 inch screws. And we're going to take our drill bit that was also provided by our pocket hole kit, and we're just going to drive these screws in here. Not overly tight because we have 4 of them, but also not overly tight so that we don't blow through the other side, because this is still soft wood.
Okay, now it's time to cut down our bottom base of plywood. This is because our frame is going to go on the outside of this base, and in order to have our top piece fit flush, we need to remove 3 inches total for the length and width.
Alright, so the next step in the process is we're going to take this bottom shelf here, we're going to have to attach it to our legs. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this bottom shelf flush with the bottom of our legs, and what I'm going to do is pocket hole on here into our legs. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a 2x4 piece along the length flush with the bottom and have pocket holes running from the plywood into that. We'll do that on both sides and all 4 corners. Alright, now that I got all my holes pocketed out, there's a lot of them, now I'm going to have to measure out my piece that's going to go right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set these up on either side, and I'm going to measure in between them from there, and that'll give me my distance rather than just going off what it should be. I'm going to take a true measurement of what it actually is. There could be variances in the wood and so forth.
Alright, taking my 2 measurements, the short measurement here is 17 inches, and this long measurement right here is 40 7/8. I cut my pieces to length on the miter saw, and then it was time to cut my pieces to width on the table saw. The bottom pieces were 1.5 inches, whereas the top pieces were 1.25 inches. The reason for the difference is when clamping my piece to the workbench, I wanted that bottom bar to be smaller so my clamps would have an easier time reaching and clamping my material down.
Alright guys, so now you can see I got all my pocket holes drilled in this bottom panel right here, and I got my whole border created around this shelf. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill some pocket holes from this border into my legs and make that one solid frame. And then after that, I'll just drop my panel into place and drill everything in.
Okay, now using some clamps and accompanied by a little friend of mine, we screwed our border into our legs. Now, these clamps weren't long enough for those long pieces, and that created an issue. When I screwed my piece in, it began to twist. Now in hindsight, I should have used my face clamps and clamped at the joint, and that would have prevented all of that. But I just didn't think of it at the time. But definitely face clamp at your joint, and that'll prevent any twisting.
Hey guys, new day here, obviously, and so I bought the top piece of plywood for my workbench, and I also bought a couple screws. So I bought 1.5" screws that I'm going to be using to attach the piece to our frame here. But then I also bought a counter sink set. And so I bought the set because really expensive, but be the best bang for the buck. So I'm going to be countersinking the heads of the screws into here so that they're all flush. And I'm going to put a little bit of glue on before I do so let's get to it.
Okay, a quick tip when using these bits. These bits heat up very quickly and tend to smoke. So when drilling these holes, drill slowly and don't overheat your bit.
Alright guys, now I got the top on, so let's flip this upside down, put the wheels on, and then we can do a little bit of sanding just to take off the rough edges.
Okay, when measuring for these casters, I set them in 1/4 inch on both sides. Also, when drilling these holes, I made sure to avoid any joints or screws when positioning my caster.
Alright guys, well that's going to be a wrap on the workbench here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully it was a little bit of an inspiration for some of you who might be in my situation. A little bit less area to work, and you can only really afford a small workbench, not those giant ones. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you guys would like. And also I have more content to follow. The summer's coming up, and so I plan on putting out a lot more projects, build videos, and also some tool reviews in the future. So stay tuned guys. Thank you.